As usual, another great guest, but a quick diversion. You'll notice that our full name is the Marketplace for Health, Wealth, and Freedom. Well, let's talk about your health for a moment. If you'd like to escape from the stranglehold of insurance and be able to see alternative doctors or go across state lines for care, then you definitely need to take a look at patientempowerment.mpb.health and see if that's the fix you've been looking for. Now, let's get back to the show.
Welcome to Freedom Hub's Health, Biz, and Politics weekly webinar. I'm Charlie Froman, and my co-host Jim Graypeck is along for the ride. Jim, you want to say hello?
Sorry, I guess I shut my camera off at the wrong time. Welcome, everybody. Yeah, thanks for being here, Dean.
Did you, Jim, did you have any words of wisdom for today?
Nope. I'm along for the ride, as you said. So
okay.
Thank you. Yep.
So let me share my screen here and just say a few words about the context. You know, as I like to repeat ad nauseum here over the past 3 years, Forbes featured our cash patient making plan as one of the best alternatives for Obamacare. Mainly because we found a way to insert the health savings account that 30 million people have, which is the best retirement vehicle there is, tax advantage wise. And our concierge has really beefed up to help folks shop on cash. And the reason cash needs help shopping is because people are intimidated. And the cash market platforms have a similar problem. It is the panacea. You can't reform healthcare without fixing the demand side of healthcare, supply and demand. You got to have patients shopping on price, which is hard because prices are so opaque. So for the platforms that have tried it, I have up right now, wow. Their method is Amazon, upcharge what the doctor wants to get, so you can pay agents like me to go solicit doctors and businesses to use the Catch Appointments app. The other platform, Mish, is doing a pay or play model. The doctors pay to join the platform. They're used to that, I guess, here and there. UberDoc is easy for providers. They just offer a few $100 consult fee for cash patients. So the getting in part is pretty easy. Dr. Hennessy at Prater, he has the hammer approach, reference-based pricing. He's funny on LinkedIn. He wants to commoditize most outpatient care and just give doctors a percentage above Medicare, which has become the price control in effect nationally. So, I'll close those platforms up because that's not our featured guest today. What the cash platforms have found is a chicken or the egg dynamic problem. The doctors I talk to want to know how many cash patients you have. The business owners I talk to want to know how many doctors you have on the platform. So what each of these platforms have had to do, and we're all entrepreneurs, we learn by trial and error. We've had to hire agents in local markets to go solicit the doctors and the business owners at the same time. They have to be curious, open-minded people in the first place. I mean, doctors at all these conferences, they want cash patients, but they're scared to go cash. They're scared to go direct. They like the safety and comfort of being employees in hospitals and just working with the intimidating insurance companies and getting in their networks. And being, having their right brain creative side hampered. It's really terrible for the healthcare market. It's kind of why we're such a bad country for chronic disease. These standards of care have dumbed down care. The past 2 years, COVID hysteria has shown people that they hate healthcare even more. And a lot of us, especially Dean and I, have a Liberty background a bit. He was a director at the Koch Industries. I was the government affairs associate director at the Cato Institute. So our Liberty bias is going to look for those entrepreneurs that get, in our opinion, the supply and demand fix. Because if you don't have a clean supply and demand curve, you can't fix a market. So patients have been dumbed down. They're just doing what the doctor says. They're just saying, what's my copay? That's horrible. You can't have a demand curve with that kind of pathetic demand. Supply side is gummed up by top down. The doctors are all employees. You got to have more entrepreneurship on the supply side. That's why this is a terrible market. It's a health cartel. Dean at Fair Market Health is going to take us through some slides, building the case for cash, and then give us a tour of his site. A lot of folks are going to want to talk to him, how to get his help helping our cash patients shop for tests, procedures, and specialists. So this is exciting. Dean, welcome.
Yeah, thank you for that. I almost feel like just applauding. I couldn't agree more. That was great.
Thank you.
I'm gonna pull up my screen here. Hopefully it'll let me do what I want to do. Bear with me. All right, can y'all see that?
Yep.
Great. So Charles, great introduction. I think that set us up well for the discussion I was hoping we could have. And I've got 10 slides here, as you can see. I'm gonna flip through these pretty quick because I think at least half of this is just reminding us all what we already know. And I'll start with this slide I'm sure many of you have seen. We in the US spend significantly more than other developed countries. When you look at the bottom end of this list, there's several countries that have nationalized their healthcare. And so I'm certainly not in the camp of advocating for that. But even if you pay attention to the top end of this range, you can tell we're outspending everyone by a long shot. And again, what we already know is that's not because we use more healthcare, and it's also not because we are receiving better outcomes, because those would, in theory, both be fine and okay reasons for spending more, but we're getting neither of those. We're not consuming more and we're not getting better results. And so what that spells is we're getting very bad outcomes. Again, another slide that you've all seen, courtesy of the Kaiser Foundation. Costs are going up, both in terms of what the employers are paying and what employees are paying. This obviously does have a trickle-down effect on what individuals and uninsured patients pay. And I think one of the reasons that we're all having the conversation we're having is there's really no end in sight. The market that we're living in right now is fueling continual increases with again, no solutions in sight. This puts the premium spend in some useful context. I think it shows you how premiums have increased in relation to wages and overall inflation. And that chart spells trouble for all of us as individuals, for sure, but it also spells trouble for businesses. This chart I put in just because again, one you've probably all seen before, but I think it is helpful to have the context of how health insurance is purchased from an employer standpoint. And what this basically says is the bigger you are, the more likely you are to be self-funding some or all of your employees' healthcare. And there's a trend that you can see in the orange line here that shows more and more employers taking on more and more of the obligation of their employees' healthcare. And overall, I think that is a very good trend. And actually, I think it's going to be a trend that continues to move up and to the right. And I would even predict personally that might even slightly accelerate absent some changes coming into the market. This chart's a little different in that it's basically just showing a breakout of the workforce over time, the labor force. And what this chart shows, as you can see, is that millennials are now the largest workforce in the population. And again, this chart's dated back to 2016. So of course, these trends are all continuing. And what it also shows is that the post-millennials or Gen Zs are now coming into the marketplace. And my point of including this chart is just a reminder for all of us that millennials and so-called post-millennials or Gen Zs, those are the generations that have never lived in a world without digital technology. They are the ones that have grown up with the Ubers and the Amazons and all the other marketplaces that exist. And so as employers and as we interact with employers, more and more of them are going to have workforces that look at the way that healthcare is currently procured in the US, and they're going to think it's crazy and frustrating. And it is all of those things, but the generations that are coming up are not going to, I believe, be fine with the status quo just from a customer experience standpoint. I think we need to be thinking about that. I think that's a positive thing in terms of driving change and changing the status quo. And again, I mentioned some of the platforms, and of course I could fill this chart with marketplace platforms that have disrupted other industries. The rental market, the restaurants, real estate, delivery, consumer goods, transportation. I could go on and on with all kinds of marketplace platforms that have been created with an end consumer in mind, but their fundamental function is collecting or connecting buyers and sellers. And I think what probably all of us on this call would advocate for is, why don't we have this in healthcare? And I think there's a big opportunity there. To me, we do spend a lot of time talking in our circles about the high cost of healthcare and the rising cost of healthcare. And I think that's an important conversation that we should be having. What I see talked about a little bit less, it's still talked about, but maybe not enough, is because of the high cost of care and because of the inefficiency of delivering that care, there is a lot of avoidance of care. And I think we could all agree, that has very expensive and negative downstream consequences. When people aren't being diagnosed timely or are not taking their medications because they can't afford them. I mean, there's just all kinds of bad and again, very expensive downstream impacts that result in that. And I think that's something we all have to keep our eye on. And then just the overall poor patient experience of our current system, I think is an opportunity, because as entrepreneurs, we all know that, when we see opportunity, that's where the entrepreneur needs to step in. The last slide here, and then I'm going to just open it up for discussion, because I'm sure there's, or I hope there's lots of questions and comments. The last thing I wanted to focus on was the benefits of price transparency. And Charles did an amazing job of talking about the importance of price as the clearing mechanism between supply and demand. And I think we can all agree that is fundamentally missing from our market today. And I think there is a lot of good things that come from price transparency. Cost, yes, is a key driver of it. But as I said, I think, and we try to do this a little bit in the business I'm with, we spend a lot of time talking about the intangible benefits of price transparency, the peace of mind that comes to patients in particular from knowing the cost of the service that they're receiving and knowing that cost up front and knowing that they're not going to get bills with errors or surprise bills because there was an out-of-network physician that they saw unbeknownst to them. And obviously there's a lot happening in the legislative space trying to regulate surprise bills and price transparency. And I think those are all fine things, but at the end of the day, we really need market solutions that deliver those things. I just think regulatory solutions typically fall a little short, and that's not me bashing regulatory efforts. I think sometimes they serve a purpose, but I don't think they're ultimately are going to be a solution that's going to be satisfactory to either employers or employees / patients. So with that, I'm gonna open it up, and I guess, Charles, I'll take your advice. If you want me to do a quick rundown of our site, I can do that. Or we can just open it up now.
Well, yeah, why don't you do a quick tour of your site? And then, you know, I'm going to ask when you're done with that, or just how did you get here? You know, what steps in your life, Coke, you know, we're all interested in the coctopus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why are you the guy, or one of the main guys, fixing cash shopping?
Yeah. Great. Can you guys all see that slide?
Yep.
Okay, so this is fair market health, and it's you know, there's some similarities and there's some differences to the sites that Charles shared at the top of the call, and I'll try to point out some of them. And I think where we're all aligned is price transparency is key. Our site, you can come into this search bar, Google-ish style search bar, and you can you know, type in whatever keyword or service you're looking for, put in your zip code, and it will pull up results. I'm gonna show this to you in a very simple. Oops, gotta spell it right. We'll pull up colonoscopy. We'll put in my zip, Wichita, Kansas. We'll do a search, and immediately it pulls up a list of 11 providers here. And the way our platform works is, for providers, we don't charge providers to participate. It's free for providers. What we commit to providers is that we will pay them quickly in cash, usually within 24 to 48 hours of them completing their service. They don't need to do any insurance coding for us. They don't need to do any billing. They don't need to chase us for collections. All they have to do is go back into our platform, hit the done button, and that tells our platform it's time to move payment. And for a colonoscopy, that's a payment to the anesthesiologist, a payment to the doctor, a payment to the facility, and a payment to the pathologist. They all get their own separate payments. What also is somewhat unique with our platform is we don't negotiate price with providers. We tell providers they can charge whatever they want to charge, because we believe the market will decide whether their price is fair and reasonable. And so, as you can see, and these providers that I'm going to scroll through, you can see they all have basically the same price. I mean, here's a $40 difference, but these two providers are in the same practice. And then you scan down, this guy's actually in, he's a standalone primary care physician who does colonoscopy. So you can see his price is a little bit different. You scan all the way down here, you can see that we've got providers at Ridgewood Surgery Center who are charging $1,243. And for us, we're fine with that. We are totally fine that one provider is charging a different price than another provider. And the other thing is, providers on our platform are free to change their price at any point they want. And then the last thing I'll just quickly show you is, this is a listing of all the services that we currently have available. And if I click on any one of these, it'll open up another menu of specific services within that category that are available. So I'll just show you quickly. You know, within imaging, we have all these services within MRI. And again, the key is, when you click on any one of these, you get to see, in this case, it's a location because it's an imaging service, and you see the transparent price. And to us, that's key. And when you hit add to cart, because what we tell people is, if you can shop on Amazon, you know how to use our service. And here there's a login service that's required, or login that's required. But our point is, we want to make it very easy for the end consumer to acquire the services that they're looking for.
And how do you make your money?
Great question. We add a fee to every transaction. So we are only paid as services are purchased. And what we tell our clients, our employer clients, is we're only making money when you're saving money, because we demonstrate to them how these cash prices are significantly beat the prices they're getting through their insurance carrier networks.
Right. And there will occur the gas station corner effect as you're demonstrating, as these providers list their prices, they go in and see why they're losing business. I'm overpriced.
Exactly. And you know,
Um,
we get a question a lot from providers, those that we're onboarding onto the platform, that, you know, some of them will say, well, isn't this a race to the bottom on price? And my response to that is always, I don't know about you, but I don't necessarily make price my number one criteria for shopping for healthcare. I might do that when I'm looking for a lawnmower, but I don't do that necessarily when I'm looking for healthcare. And I think that's true for most people.
that's true. And do you have any quality feedback loops in this platform, or is it just price?
No, well, two things, because we get the quality question a lot. We primarily work with multi-physician practices. And so those physician practices do serve a quality control mechanism, because all the doctors on our platform have their own individual and personal reputations that they care and understandably care very deeply about. We have the ability to basically disinvite any provider at any point. So at any point, we see a provider who is not providing high quality service, we have the ability to disinvite them.
And there's also malpractice penalties if they abuse
Of
patients.
course, of course.
That's Henry Hazlitt's lesson from his 46 classic Economics in One Lesson, that the best protection is reputation or the fear of losing it.
Yep. Well, and the other thing I'll comment to employers who ask that question is, I'm not trying to be a combative, but my question to them is, well, how does your insurance carrier do it? And the reality is they don't, because insurance carriers, when they're negotiating with large hospital systems, it's a take us all or take none of us approach. And insurance carriers have basically bought into that. Large health systems say you're either taking all of our docs or you're getting none of them. And so there is no screening mechanism that takes place in an insurance carrier provider network.
And I guess for the chicken or the egg problem, you've focused where you are home-wise, and how's that going?
Yeah, well, it actually informed that very problem, informed our approach to how we interact with providers. That's why we look at our solution as being as much for providers as it is for end consumers and employers, the so-called payers. We want the platform to be extremely easy to use and beneficial for providers. And again, that's also why we don't charge providers. We want to get to a quick yes and an easy yes. And so when a provider says, well, how many patients do you have in my area? Our response starts with, well, it's a small number, or maybe it's even zero, but it's no cost to you. There's no downside to you. So let's get services up. So we ask the providers in our platform to be the first movers, which is not to say that we're not running both trains in parallel. We're actively recruiting self-insured employers and patients as fast as we're recruiting patients, but ultimately we ask providers to be first movers.
That's great. And as Sam has his hand up, as you unmute yourself, if you would quickly kind of answer my earlier question, how did you get here? From Coke, why are you the man to run this and really push the cash market? What life lessons got you here?
Yeah. So I've spent my entire career in finance, and that's what I was doing for the Cokes. I've worked 13 years inside Coke Industries, mostly focused on mergers and acquisitions, buying and selling of companies, and finance leadership roles. And then the last 7 years I was with Coke. I was actually working for the Coke family, helping them on investment strategy and running some businesses and some of their philanthropy. And I actually wasn't looking for a different job or a new role. I was very happy and what I was doing and getting to work on interesting things. And this opportunity, I was actually involved tangentially as an advisor. A good friend of mine actually started this business. And so I was a business advisor to him because he was a friend of mine. And the deeper I got into helping advise, the more enamored I became with the opportunity here. And ultimately what won me over was I had friends who used the service as patients, and they came back and they told me about their experience, not only in terms of the savings, but just in terms of the overall patient experience. And that was ultimately what sold me on the opportunity. And as to why me, God only knows. I don't know that I'm necessarily the most qualified. I've certainly got I believe, a sense for business. I've got free market tattoos on me, but I don't have any specific experience in healthcare. I did some healthcare consulting years and years ago, but by no means am I an expert on healthcare. And in some sense, I almost feel like that's an advantage. I'm not mired down in any, here's how it is, or here's how it used to be. I think it's important to understand those things, but I have no allegiance to how it is.
Sam, you have your hand up?
Yes,
So
Charles, thank you. Thank you. Dean, thanks for being here. Very interesting. I have a number of questions. So Charles, feel free to cut me off whenever I'm using up too much airtime, because I'm sure there are other people questions as well. But let me start with the first one that comes to mind, Dean, which is you mentioned employers. You're signing up employers. So that confused me a little bit, because who's paying for this? Is it the employer, or is it the patient paying directly the cash price? And if it is the employers, how does it work with their health plans? Because from what I understand, you're layering on another sort of administrative overhead to sort of work outside of the health plan to make these payments, et cetera. So how does all that work?
Yeah, so great questions. So when we work with employers, what we tell employers and how it actually does work is we don't tell employers to really subtract anything. We tell them this is all about addition. So if you're with United Healthcare, you're buying a United Healthcare network or a Blue Cross Blue Shield network or Anthem or whoever it is, keep all of that in place. Don't take any of that away. And what we instruct or coach our clients, and typically we're working with a broker as well, is we create, where it makes sense, incentives for employees to look at this parallel network, if you will, the fair market health network. So we just put our platform next to the existing insurance carrier provided network. And we create incentives for employees to at least look and shop on fair market health before they go enter onto the insurance carrier network. And what employees typically see, whether they're on a high deductible plan or whether their employer is providing some kind of incremental incentive through waived deductibles, waived co-pays, waived co-insurance, they encourage employees to come shop on our site first. And the reason the employer is willing to create those incentives is because of the savings opportunity. And we run claims analysis for employers and show them, do apples to apples comparison and say, I'm using Wichita, Kansas examples here, but the insurance carrier network, for example, generally charges $11,000 for a hysterectomy. You can buy that same service on our site for $7,000. A knee replacement in Wichita, Kansas is $30,000, $40,000, sometimes $50,000. You can buy that same service on our site for $20,000. And by the way, those costs are inclusive of our fee. And so when employers see those savings opportunities, they know they have room to create incentives for their employees to kind of shop on our platform first, or at least look at our platform to see if they can drive some savings.
I get that, but how is the transaction actually happening? Is the patient purchasing the service and then getting reimbursed by the employer?
Oh, yeah, got it. So very simply, when we were working with an employer and an employee logs on to the system through our site and shops and finds a service and wants to buy it, if their employer has agreed to cover the cost, either some of the cost or all of the cost. Some of the cost happens when it's just designed in line with their existing health plan design. All of the cost can happen when they just decide, hey, we're gonna create real incentives for employees to shop here. But whatever the employer's portion is, some or all, we pull that money directly from the employer. And so what happens is when you buy on our shop site, the employee has their portion calculated. Our system does all of that, and we pull that through their HSA card or their credit card, however they want to pay for it. And then the balance gets pulled from their employer's account, and we hold those funds in escrow until the service is completed and then pay the providers.
I see. So you have the employers plugged into the platform as well. And there's some kind of an escrow account or some kind of automatic withdrawal that you're able to do from the employer's account. Got it. Got it. So the next question I have is on a different vein, Dean and Charles, like I said, feel free to cut me off if you.
One more question, Sam, then we can move on.
Yeah, so scale, how do you scale this? There's a number of sites doing things that are similar, and a couple of them have been on these webinars as well. And I noticed that they're sort of, geographically restricted because it's a lot of work to sign up providers and keep everything up to date, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So how does it scale into a marketplace beyond being sort of a local marketplace to something broader? And I'll expand that question with the second part, which is I've been a self-pay patient and a shopper myself, and I find that it's easier for me to actually do it the old-fashioned way. Whether it's a Google search or it's a Yellow Pages type of directory, etc. That's by the way still floating around. And I get more choice, and I can actually get often better prices just by contacting these providers directly, because they will give me a price for colonoscopy, bundled price over the phone. They'll give me a price for brain MRI over the phone. And I found that those prices are better. So how do you scale, and why as a patient should I be, using this as opposed to other sources?
Great question. I'm gonna answer them in reverse order. So why should you as a patient? I don't think you as a patient should. You seem, like you're willing to invest the time and the energy and know what questions to ask and are even aware of the fact that you can do it in the first place. I would propose to you that you're very unique in that regard, because I find most patients aren't aware that you can even cash shop by asking for a cash price. And then even those that are aware, which is a very small number, the vast majority of that small number doesn't want to do it, either because they find it distasteful or they don't want to invest the time. And so I think you're fairly rare in terms of the kind of patient that's willing to, has the knowledge and is willing to invest the time. And so I think marketplace platforms like Fair Market Health and the others that are out there, I think they serve the vast majority of the population that isn't aware and wants it to really be easy. And again, one of the advantages is, as I showed in the colonoscopy example, is we bring the comparison together, right? If you wanted to do that yourself, you'd have to call up, at least 3 different places to get, some kind of comparison point. So I think there really is a big opportunity for most of the market that just wants the convenience of shopping in this way. And then in terms of how we scale, I'm not going to pretend to have the answer of that. It is a challenge. It is something that we're, spending a lot of time and energy trying to work through and develop strategies for it. And we're seeing good progress in that regard. A lot of what we've seen is where we reach out to employers and get some indication of interest, right? Let's say we enter a market and we have 0 providers, but we enter the market and talk to some employers and they say, yeah, this is interesting. If this existed in my market, I would be a buyer. Okay, now we've got something we can go have a conversation with the providers in the market. And it is this chicken and egg thing, but you can play a little chicken against a little egg against a little chicken, and you're driving the conversation, and the reality is you're making a market in all the geographies you go to. Now, we have seen actually, all of the providers that we have on our site, or most of them, were outbound relationships, meaning we reached out to them and made the pitch and got them on board. What we are now seeing is providers are actually now beginning to contact us. They are becoming aware of what we're doing, and again, because providers are on our platform and are now saying good things about their experience, word does start leaking out and good things start happening in that regard. But having said all of that, I don't have it figured out.
We're all trying in our different ways to help this catch market. Wen, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I just have a quick question. I was curious how robust your current kind of network is at this point.
Yeah, so great question. We started in Wichita, Kansas. I'd say it's very robust in Wichita, Kansas. And now we are beginning to spread our wings into, I'm not pretending anybody's familiar with Kansas geography, but we're about 2.5 hours from Kansas City, and they're, basically every town between Wichita and Kansas City is starting to come on board with both employers and providers. And there's, between Kansas City and Wichita, there's, in terms of both of those cities and everything in between, there's probably a market of, I would guess, roughly 2.5 to 3 million people. And one thing I'll say quickly too, I've never heard a no from any provider or any employer. Every single provider or employer that we've talked to has said, yes, this makes sense. Yes, I'm interested. Now, a few have said, hey, the timing's not right. We hear that, in particular from employers who get very caught up in their re-enrollment cycles and re-enrollment processes. Not that we need to live within any of that at all, but they want us to. And so we hear some pushback on timing, but nobody that I have talked to has looked at this and said, oh, that won't work, or I don't want to, consider it or try it. So to me, a lot of it is just getting the word out about these strategies. And I'm saying that more broadly about whether it's Fair Market Health or UberDoc or, any of the platforms that Charles previewed for us, and the many more that are out there that, have similarities. I think the more people are aware of this, the more traction we're going to get as a group.
Do you have anything outside of Kansas?
The only thing we have outside of Kansas right now is in Detroit, Michigan. And that's because one of our providers, a large hospital chain, really wanted us to get some of their services up in the Detroit area. And I'll tell you, I don't mind telling you, Coke's got a large presence there, and there's some interesting conversations. So if I had to predict we were getting to another market outside of Kansas first, I'd probably put my finger on Detroit. But we do have plans, I'd say regionally, in the Midwest is probably where we'll focus first. So, Kansas surrounds Oklahoma, Texas, Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, Colorado. Those are all interesting markets to us. And we're starting to dip our toes into all of them.
What incentives would you offer agents, like there's a few of them on this call, to help you market to providers and owners, business owners?
Great question. We are definitely open to that. We're not doing it today, but that's not because we're not interested in those kinds of relationships and building those kinds of relationships. I mean, I get the power of incentives. I embrace the power of incentives. And so, yes, we have had conversations about, figuring out how to work out something that's interesting to brokers who would be out selling our services. And so I would love to engage in that kind of a conversation for sure. We have, again, our platform's built in a very interesting way in that, again, we get paid on a transactional basis, as I said before, we're getting paid when we're helping save people money. It would be very easy for us to put a little sliver of that every transaction into, brokers who are bringing us business.
Yeah, that's what WOW does. And it'll be interesting in Detroit how you and WOW compete, because that's where Dr. Arshad is focusing, because that's where he's an ER doc at Henry Ford.
Sure.
That'll be very, very interesting laboratory wise to see how competitors can really ramp up scale. Detroit, spread there to Cleveland, Chicago. That would be very, very interesting to watch.
In fact, one thing I believe strongly, and I'll say it quickly because I know we got more questions, but I actually believe the markets where there are multiple options, like these cash pay platforms, I think markets that have more than one actually will become stronger because it'll give employers in particular more confidence in what we're doing.
Yeah, it's
we won't be
stereo.
one-offs. Yeah.
It's stereo versus mono.
Exactly.
It'll be better for all of us. Christina, your hand is up. You want to unmute yourself? Go ahead.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. First of all, I know we've talked about this. There's other platforms and things like that, but obviously great idea. I did make one comment at the beginning that healthcare has been really slow to adopt this, but I have to say I've been in medical tourism for 20 years, and we have absolutely fully embraced the cash payment model without fear and trepidation. And another thing you said that I agree with, that free market healthcare solution, I absolutely have endorsed the idea that medical tourism has really been the absolute free market healthcare idea, because we've been able, like you were saying, step outside of the insurance, step outside of all these networks and things like that, and really go for that. So these are really great ideas that we've been doing this for a long time. But my question here is, as you were just mentioning, just came up, have you guys considered sharing providers from all these platforms? So obviously each platform is kind of focusing on certain regions, or Kansas City or Detroit, and mentioning that it would be beneficial if there was more than one player. Is there any ideas to maybe, share providers so you can kind of onboard each other's provider? Does that make sense, Charlie?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And it's a very insightful question and observation. In fact, it's one that we at Fair Market Health have been spending a lot of time thinking about and talking about over the last many weeks and months.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that there is a strategy here, because one of the things I've kind of observed at a high level is, sometimes as new entrepreneurs, we spend more time fighting each other than fighting the beasts and the dragons that we should be fighting, which is the large insurance networks.
Yeah.
And I do think there is an opportunity for collaboration and cooperation here. I mean, the reality is so-called leased or rented networks is a very common practice across whole areas of healthcare that again, the insurance carriers leverage to their great benefit. And why couldn't we as a movement consider and do the same thing? We're heavy in Kansas, and again, we're looking to grow. Mishi's in kind of California, and WOW's in Detroit, and everybody's got kind of their area of the country where they've started to develop and focus. But could we all be stronger collaborating and sharing our provider networks? I think so. And in fact, one thing I tell our providers all the time is we don't ask for exclusivity from providers. What I tell providers all the time is you should be on as many of these platforms as you can find. Go get on all of them.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, just be consistent. Well, so again, we're dealing with the same thing in medical tourism. We're still, feeling like we have to compete rather than collaborate, and it's extremely frustrating, whether it's because it's a, still a new industry, that even though I've been doing this 20 years, so I definitely see the struggles there. So it sounds like then the idea here is, which again is similar to our platforms that do this exact same thing in medical tourism, is this idea of the model, Bain, you mentioned these other cash play platforms I do like yours that you only charge, you charge a fee for, the service you provide. I'm totally about transparency. I do not agree with pay to play. I do not agree with those that are not reputation based. I do not agree with those that are doing commissions and all this other stuff. So transparency is absolutely the best. So I applaud you on that. But would you say that's the biggest difference between those 3 or 4 platforms that Charlie mentioned? And yours is the
Yeah,
income model?
I think that's one of them. I break down the transparency marketplace really into 3 buckets, and I gotta think for a minute to make sure I say this right. I think there are ultimately transparency providers, if you will, or platforms that provide price transparency with shopping capability. And so I put Fair Market Health in that category. So it's like you can see the price, and not only can you see the price, you can shop, you can buy things based on that price. I think there are others that play in this space, and I'm not trying to say anybody's, one's right and one's wrong, but there's a whole category of providers in that space that give you price transparency, but you can't shop. Like these providers that are trying to bring hospital prices to market. They're consolidating all the disclosed hospital prices. Again, useful services, but there's no shopping capability to it. So those fall a little short to me. I'm not saying they don't serve a market purpose, and then the last category is there's people that do ultimately provide shopping, but there's no actual direct price transparency. In other words, you got to fill out a form, and they'll get back with you and tell you what things cost. And again, I'm not saying there's not a place for those, but so I break down the market into all of those three buckets. And of course, I'm in the camp of believing that we should be providing the consumer price transparency, meaning don't make them jump through any hoops, just show them the price and give them the ability to buy it.
Yes, absolutely. Agreed. All right, I'm good. Thanks.
What about that, Dean? People are frustrated with the cartel. The standards of care don't really cater to the self-thinking patient who understands a lot of allopathy is useless for chronic disease. People getting cancer are going to want to go to Tijuana, where all the innovative therapists are. I've had them on my show. So allowing cash shopping worldwide, not just domestically, is that something you thought of?
You bet. Yeah, you bet. We've been in conversations with a provider down in the Bahamas, who provides specialty pharma, insulin at significantly lower prices. Yeah, we're open to all of that.
Excellent. Joe.
Hey, Dean. I'm curious, how does this impact Medicare and Medicaid for the boomers that are out there?
Great question. Great question. To my great frustration, we've been told repeatedly, and I mean repeatedly, by providers that they're very nervous about violating any kind of Medicare or even Medicaid laws. And so the way our platform has been designed so far is you actually have to check a box as part of the checkout process, declaring that you are not a Medicare or Medicaid patient. So we eliminate that part of the market. And the reason we do that is not because philosophically we would love to serve that market. In fact, we think the government would be smart to open up to fair market solutions, but every provider that we've talked to has said, no, I don't want to be anywhere near or have the potential of being accused of steering patients away from Medicare. It's a big no-no, and it's an area that frankly we just decided not to fight the battle. There's a big enough market below the Medicare age. We're focusing on that right now. I've got it on my mind to go fight that battle another day, but it's not the battle I'm fighting today.
Because I mean, ultimately, just from your perspective, I guess, not so much a business thing, but the Medicare and Medicaid is really almost starting to dictate what people's healthcare should be, right? And that's where, like, as a personal shopper, like, I have a huge issue with that.
Yep, totally
Okay.
agree. Couldn't agree more.
And then I'm in Wisconsin, so partially, are you thinking of like looking at the Midwest because of the health of the individuals in the Midwest versus the health of the individuals in other parts of the country?
I wouldn't so much say that. I'd say it has more to do with, I just find the middle of the country to be a little bit more free market minded, frankly. You know, there's just less government overreach, less government reg, less hurdles to mess with. And again, that's not me saying eventually I wouldn't love to figure out how to get in, you know, Washington, Oregon, California, and everywhere on the East Coast as well. It's just, I'm going where I see opportunity, and I have a much easier time so far talking to business owners and patients and providers just kind of up and down the middle of the country. And honestly, there's another part of our strategy that kind of looks at markets based on how consolidated the healthcare market is, right? There's some towns that are kind of owned by one health system. Those are difficult markets to, you know, make progress in. Well, I'd rather focus my attention on markets where there's more independence in practice at the provider level. And, you know, some part of what we're looking at is, do we focus on towns, you know, similar to Wichita, Des Moines, Iowa, and Omaha, Nebraska, and, you know, Indianapolis, Indiana, and, you know, some of those kinds of markets where, again, there's a little bit more openness to free market, more entrepreneurial spirit.
Do you find more success in small hospitals, like in communities that have small hospitals?
Yeah. You know, what I say all the time is this is a win-win-win strategy. It's a win for patients. It's a win for employers. It's a win for providers. The only people who are losing here really, in fact, I don't even think ultimately what we're doing here, unless we got exponentially bigger as a movement, I don't think this is even going to impact insurance carriers that significantly. I think the people who will be impacted most significantly and first are large health systems. And we see that in our market. We have two large hospital systems in our market. One is cooperating with fair market health and is thinking very innovatively. One doesn't want anything to do with this. And the reason for that is their facility fees are significantly higher than our all-inclusive bundled prices. We have a labor and maternity bundle offered on our platform at the competing hospital. I think the number is like $10,000 or $12,000, again, significantly below the insurance rate. We talked to the other hospital, hey, do you want to offer an insurance bundle? They looked at our all-inclusive price and they said that doesn't even cover our facility fee. No, thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Last question, Jim.
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you, Dean. My question has to do with marketing. But before I get to that, though, I just want to share a quick story. I have a provider. I saw a doc who was helping me with some nutritional stuff and blood work and looking at things. She was not a Medicare, not in, you know, participating in the Medicare program. And but the receptionist said, here, if you want to submit some, you know, some of the invoices, I'll give them to you. You have to do it. And I figured, what the hell? I sent it in, and a few months later, because it's a slow system, the doctor, she calls me up and goes, what did you do? I said, nothing. I mean, your receptionist gave me something. Apparently Medicare is coming after her just for that. Yeah, she said, they said, you're not participating. The patient can't send in something. You know, we need to talk. And she got pretty nervous about that. So and said, look, you can't be my patient if this is going to happen. I said, no, I don't have to send him in. Nobody told me, but I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, and that intimidation is real, right? That happens from the insurance carriers and the government payers. You bet.
Yeah. So marketing, I'm curious what you use to get in the door. For example, you know, a mailer, or just word of mouth. You have a video for the company.
Yeah,
what's working best for you? Yeah,
great question, and I wish I had a more robust and better answer. We're, as a company, I'll give you the quick history. We brought the platform live October of 2020. So a little more than a year ago. And of course, we initially went out and started recruiting providers and had success there. And then as soon as we had success there, we went and started recruiting employers and started seeing traction and success there. But for all intents and purposes, we've been at this a little over a year, using personal relationships and, all the scrappy things that startup companies do. We're now to the stage where we've realized we need to professionalize our marketing. We've actually recently hired somebody who's going to help in that space. We're working with graphic designers to kind of up or improve our marketing materials and videos and all those things that we know we need to do to reach a broader audience. Absolutely, we know we need to do it.
Thanks.
Next week, we have Dr. Wallen talking about educating the cash patient and helping specialists, dip their toe in the water to get more cash patients. But what about the integrated health market? Are you recruiting all levels of practitioners or just specialists right now in primary care?
Yeah, great question. That's one of the things that I think makes us also a little unique is a lot of the platforms that I see out there in the cash specialty market, they focus on one of two ends of the market. One is kind of the more simple primary care, telehealth, simple surgeries. And then the other group focuses a lot on the higher end and more expensive surgeries. Our strategy is actually cover the waterfront, be a comprehensive marketplace for providers. And we're doing that because we hear that from employers. They want a comprehensive solution for their employees. One of the places that we haven't yet spent a lot of time is in primary care. We love direct primary care and what I more generically say independent primary care. And so we're figuring out how to bring that onto our platform, not because we're trying to extract value from that. We're just trying to help employers and their employees and independent patients find those kinds of value primary care providers. And so we're thinking through now how to connect those dots and collaborate more effectively with, in particular, independent and direct primary care practitioners.
Well, I think you're going to hear from some folks about partnering,
Great.
how we help introduce you to new markets, because a lot of us like what you're doing.
Yeah.
Do you want to say how folks can reach you?
Yeah, probably the easiest way to get a hold of me is at my email, and it's just simply Dean, DEAN, @fairmarkethealth.com.
So what about your wealth? If your money could actually talk to you, would you listen to it? Well, with the DNA Network Academy, your money actually can talk to you. And it's going to tell you just what it told this client. This family had over 24 debts, mortgages, car loans, the works. They were on track to take 20 years to pay it all off and instead did it in 8.5. Plus, they did it without refinancing, making more money, or even changing their lifestyle. So find out for yourself with a free analysis that is completely confidential. No personal information, no social security numbers, no credit checks, none of that nonsense. But what is exciting is that the outcome of that report you receive is a guaranteed outcome for you. To get that report, head on over to bit.ly/debt to wealth. You will arrive at this simple form. Fill it in as simple as lender number 1 and credit card number 2. What really matters is the accuracy of your numbers. You'll be able to see that if instead of 20 years or whatever your number is, that you may actually be out of debt and on your way to wealth in as little as 6.3 years like this client.